news came out that Klay Thompson, one of the Splash Brothers, is leaving the Golden State Warriors. The end of the trio core of that dynasty. Very, very sad, especially given how it ended, both the parameters, I would say, of the new deal, who it's with, how much, as well as just the cloud of murky reporting of feelings, and not to mention the cinema that unraveled last season. Very clear evidence of Klay struggling to grapple with his new role and abilities and fit on the new team with the younger cast, all of those things. I want to talk about the exit that Klay had from the team, some of the observations, thoughts I have on that, what led up to it, what kind of mattered the most, and then, of course, the fit on Dallas, which everybody is doing cartwheels about. And I think there are a couple things that I want to highlight there. So the slow, painful death of the Klay Thompson a lot of us grew to love and admire began in the 2019 playoffs. Of course, he had the first of his two formerly career-ending injuries, tearing his ACL in the playoffs at the height of his powers, and absolutely demoralizing, of course, and then followed by the Achilles injury. Pretty good grounds to really, really be a reduced version of himself, both production-wise, as well as just all-around viability, being out there on the court, two-way player, all of those things. We had Curry's injury, which of course played into an anomalous second-round pick that they blew into the sun with James Wiseman. I'm sure there are potentially hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in lost potential revenue and opportunity costs, which, side note, I have to say must weigh very heavily on Wiseman. That's just kind of insane how much actually ended up being on his shoulders. Kind of just interested what he would have to say about that. That's wild. It all led up to this two timelines thing where you have the younger guys coming into the fold. The Warriors haven't been able to really pick from the top in the draft because they've been so dominant. Finding the diamonds in the rough with Brandon Pajemski and Kuminga and Moses Moody, getting guys meaningful minutes, but of course they weren't a part of the original core. And so all of this was crescendoing to Klay Thompson finding himself in a reduced role behind some of the younger cast on the team, and it was really hard for him. Everybody could see it. There were very, very evident, transparent, emotional moments and sequences in post-game interviews on the bench. The root of all of this, that's extremely evident, is he just couldn't let go of trying to be his former self and play his former role as a part of this dominant Warriors dynasty. Number one is Golden State continuing to employ its brand of basketball, of which Klay Thompson was a paramount and invaluable element and component of, and he has watched that be the case for years, having to transition to a situation where you have younger guys, newer guys, other guys getting his touches, having certain plays ran for him, of course being relegated to the bench to begin with, just seeing the ghosts of what he was night in and night out. That's just got to be tough. Two is the market itself. That is a place that had not seen that much success in its franchise history ever before, and he is 2, 3 on the list of the pecking order of the guys that are going to get the statues, that are going to be local legends, and continuing to live and be surrounded by that larger-than-life persona and expectations and nostalgia, and even more than night in and night out. That's where you sleep. That's where his family is. That's where his kids are. So when you punch in on the job, the system is orchestrating the same exact way. He's just not as big a part of it. And then he goes home, and the entire city and market is enwrapped in this nostalgia, wishfully reminiscing on how impactful and incredible he used to be. So there's really not much of an escape. And then 3 is all the while, throughout the dominant years, even throughout the original injuries, Golden State has just had a history of spoiling its course. And that's just been a profound motif of its management style that has reared its head in a multitude of ways that I don't even have to get into. People get punched in the face, people fly off the handle, locker room blow ups, guys get paid, guys get put on a pedestal. All of that feeds into their egos. It doesn't make the Warriors unique, but I just think that kind of treatment all throughout the years ultimately fed into Klay's ego, which led him to then continually try to chase his own ghost of his former self and ultimately lead him to turning his nose up at the offer sheet that the Warriors gave him, which even ended up being more than he ended up taking because, again, the feelings were hurt after a lot of that spoiling, a lot of that you can do no wrong as our original core. As soon as they broke protocol, paying Draymond last year, paying Wiggins, Klay was like, when you ask your boss for a raise, yeah, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you. Comes around, and when it's time to put your money where your mouth is, it seemed like they had already emotionally scarred Klay way too much at that point. And then we have Dallas. I think fundamentally the biggest component of his decision here comes down to physical distance from the bad memories. That place ended like a nightmare, clearly, after such incredible highs and homegrown success that, yes, he likes his boat. Great. Dallas has got some lakes. First of all, you have hundreds of millions of dollars, so, like, you can figure out how to get to the boat. Going right down the coast to the Lakers, which everybody sensed he was going to do, it just never made sense to me. They're in basically the same exact prison that the Warriors are in, unable to compete genuinely with the cream of the crop in the West that is loading up right before our eyes, on top of his dad being there and the runoff, air quote, rivalry slightly between Steph, LeBron, and the franchises and all of that. Just feels like it would propel this same sad story for the twilight of Klay's career. I fully support him for choosing Dallas. It's in the same conference, fine. He's on a real deal contender now with a lot more distance in between himself and his former stage in career with the Warriors that clearly took a toll on him emotionally. Next, Dallas specifically. For Klay Thompson himself, of course you have the world-class guard power there for him. It's going to lead to not only more spot-ups because the guards do initiate 99.9% of everything, but the types of shots he'll take are predominantly spot-up shots, which, of course, ultimately helps his physical stature with the body that he is currently in, not just looking at age, but the fact he previously had 2 career-ending injuries and is still producing at a relatively good rate. I actually think that that is going to play in quite a bit, not only from a career perspective, but within this specific season as well. Less wear for his body, which is not only going to help him perform better inside of one singular season, but also elongate the career, as well as provide all that value simultaneously for the Mavericks themselves. 2, for the Mavericks themselves, his gravity, of course, is going to make breaking down defenses easier. If you have Luka and then flanked beside him is Klay Thompson, they're really not going to be able to do what Boston did in the finals and load up in the gaps as confidently and assuredly, giving Klay Thompson, of all people, that much space. Like the perfect symbiotic scenario of making Luka and Kyrie's lives easier, as well as Klay a little more potent with the shot than Derrick Jones Jr. Klay Thompson, who is, of course, able to have plays ran for him, able to take guys off the dribble still a bit in the event that Luka or Kyrie maybe or inevitably get injured and have to miss time this upcoming season. That's just really helpful insurance. Losing Derrick Jones Jr., single tier, really sad, guy had a great story. Good for him, man. Go get paid. Bringing in Najee Marshall, everybody thought that was going to be his replacement, and I think to a large part it will be. But the thing I want to point out here is everything matters in the postseason. That's what everything is pointed to, and when you think about how things tighten up anyway, particularly at the offensive end, we've all witnessed time and time again, defenses just perk up, and the amount that just sheer effort and buy-in actually matters, and then in the postseason, it's like, oh, he's actually not atrociously terrible. That's awesome to know. But then what happens? Well, exactly what you saw happen in Denver and exactly what you saw happen in Minnesota and exactly what you saw happen to Dallas. The others clam up and shots start not falling and guys start getting in their own heads and succumbing to the pressure. And you have the Dallas Mavericks literally scoring 6 3-pointers in like game 2 of the NBA Finals, and 4 of them were by Luka. Doomsday nightmare scenario material at a genetic molecular level, and you just cannot allow that to happen with the brand of basketball Dallas wants to play. They want to force you to overhelp onto Luka and Kyrie to then open up the kick out passes. The only way you can effectively do that is if you get those two guys basically throw that first punch, which then puts you in that chokehold between, are we really going to try to force Luka and Kyrie to basically beat us by themselves, or are we going to try to play it safe and stay home? Now with Klay Thompson, you're really in a tough bind in trying to navigate that duality. And then on the other side of the ball, losing Derrick Jones Jr., absolutely a loss and absolutely a downgrade, bringing in Klay Thompson to replace him. But what I want to point out here is, sure, his defense isn't as good as Derrick Jones Jr., but you know what? Stuff tightens up anyway, as we saw in Minnesota, as we saw in Denver, as we saw in Dallas. Even though Klay's defensive potency has dipped, certainly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's closing every single game. I mean, he might not start, or maybe he'll do like that Russell Westbrook, like start and then take him out right away or something like that. Whatever. But when we're talking about the postseason, you're going to want a dude who has literally won 4 NBA championships closing the games. And so that's why I don't really care about the, oh man, is Najee Marshall going to slot in to start? Is Klay going to come in? How are they going to do that? I don't really know, and I don't really care. That level of championship experience, awareness, know-how, pedigree is going to outweigh the slippage defensively, because you have to be ready to deliver and make the big shots that the air quote others have to be able to do to situate their entire chokehold model between their world-class point of attack initiators and everybody else waiting on the outside. You need that gravitational pull to upend what Boston did to them this past year. You can't sit in the gaps and leave Klay Thompson with his high, fast release with too much space, because he is more than willing to take the shots, but is also a proven lifetime outside shooter. Whether he's shooting 45, 55% from 3 or not, Klay Thompson is always going to have that. That is something he has earned rightfully. Dallas would be remiss to not squeeze every single drop out of. Again, I know the defense isn't quite there. I'm specifically talking about deep in the postseason when all of these things will happen. I thought a lot about Kyrie Irving in the wake of this trade. I think everybody got excited about the vengeful Klay, and everybody wants cinema and that kind of action movie, and I get it, but I would be remiss not to remind everybody about what we have seen from an emotional, vengeful Klay Thompson before, where he's either avenging his own self in chasing his ghost to become the potent player that he was previously, hunting shots, taking bad shots, or now with a franchise that he thought was going to be his for the remainder of his career and look out for him and take care of him and continually give him these opportunities that he had previously gotten. We've seen that go sideways. And of course, you pin that next to an all-time psychopathic competitor in Luka Doncic. I just think that this chemical compound absolutely has some flammability to it. And so that is why I ultimately thought a lot about Kyrie Irving in this scenario. Kyrie is the other championship presence on the Dallas Mavericks roster. He also ascended and claimed the title of franchise Sherpa, him being amongst such a young core, as well as one that was concocted together pretty recently before their ultra deep playoff run, helping Luka play with more joy and shining a light on everything else outside of basketball, as opposed to living and dying by his success on the basketball court. These are all things Luka has pointed out before. I think Kyrie has to have that same kind of presence, man. He really thrived being that Sherpa, being that guide of, hey man, this is awesome. We have to be in the moment. We have to be gracious. We have to recognize how amazing this opportunity is. And we have to play with joy as a result of all of that. Klay is coming from a situation that could not be more of the opposite from that mindset. You pin that again with Luka Doncic. Both of those guys are pretty emotional. and they are very, very competitive. And ultimately, we saw Kyrie, I believe, have one of the most profound impacts on last year's postseason that will never show up in a box score, that will probably never end up in a Twitter argument or Reddit thread or anything else. I don't think Luka Doncic is going to make it as far as he did on 1.5 knees, one of them bleeding nonstop, arguing with the refs as little as he ultimately did. Yes, he had flashes in the one game, of course, where everybody freaked out about it. But as a whole, Luka was sensational. From the words that Luka himself has spoken, Jason Kidd has pointed out as well, and Kyrie, of course, has spoken at length in his post-game interviews exactly what role he took upon himself to play. And now he has another guy there where I really think that Kyrie is going to have to play a similar role for in helping guide him towards playing the game with much more joy.